notes. The Assistant Director of Personnel and Member Care for U.S. Send Missionaries. SEND is the name of the mission organization. I think that Betsy is uniquely gifted to do the many aspects of her job, which includes training missionaries for the field and doing debriefing with those on the field to provide them with both spiritual and emotional support to encourage them in their ministry. Betsy spent time as an overseas missionary in Spain, so she understands all that's involved with adapting to other cultures and especially the spiritual warfare that occurs to impede the spreading of the gospel, even in the U.S. I'm going to be a little bit of a historian at this point. Grizzled Street has a long, long history with Send International. Rex and Lori Durham, who many of you remember, they served in East Russia at a seminary there, and that seminary became I forget what the term is, but anyway, the Russian evangelical people were able to take over and actually run the seminary after a number of years. Some of us have had the blessing of being short-term missionaries through the auspices of Send International. So they helped arrange our visas and paperwork and things so that we could go to both Far East Russia and Ukraine. And you may remember Chuck and Sandra Hall from years ago. They served at a mission school in Japan, and we supported them for, I think, 30 or 40 years. And before them, some of you old-timers might remember the Plaziks, Frank and Esther Plazik from Japan. I'm from here, but serving in Japan. So that goes back probably not all of the 80 years that Send has been around. Can't hear me? So I'll go all the way back. No. Thank you. Okay. Well, I'm almost at the end anyway.
I know. We'll finish up.
Okay. So anyway, we've enjoyed a long relationship with the mission that Betsy works with. And again, it's my privilege to introduce her. Oh, okay. Betsy, good luck with this. Okay, thanks. Is that better? Okay. So anyway, my privilege to introduce Betsy, and I know the Lord has laid something special on her heart to share with us this morning. So let's again welcome Betsy. You're welcome.
And I have some handouts.
Oh, can I help with those? She has handouts.
Okay, so I have, since I forgot my white copy, there are 29 of those. Okay. Whoop. At least your podium here is short enough for me. A lot of times I can't see over them at churches. If you can't hear me, please wave and let me know, okay? And I can't help myself. I have to tell one missionary food story, okay? And sitting here eating, it just crossed my mind, and I don't know if the Barons, if they have had this experience, but I was in Indonesia, and I have been in about 25 countries. And I went to Indonesia because we had missionaries there, and we were trying to figure out if we could make the field bigger. And I was a part of the team that was sent to try to figure out if we could get other missionaries in. The problem is visas. What kind of visa could we get for people? So I read up ahead of time, and it was talking about a certain type of restaurant. And I read, and I didn't know how can this restaurant exist, because they only charged you for what you ate. they did not charge you for a whole plate or a whole platter. It was at the end of the meal, they figured out what you ate, and you only got charged for that. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And I thought, well, we probably won't go to one of those. But we did go to one of those restaurants. And I kept an eye out. And as the food came, I admit there were things that I never knew what it was. And you don't ask, you just, when I teach missions to kids, I will bring things from different countries for them to try. And my rule with my children in Sunday school is, you have to taste it, you don't have to swallow it. So I have a trash can right there, and if the kids want to spit it out, they can spit it out. And I always have something I know the kids will want, a piece of chocolate, something afterwards, also from that country, to try to get the taste out. So my kids were pretty adventurous, but this restaurant I thought was going to be rather adventurous. And I kept watching, and then I realized why they only charged you for what you ate. On that side was the dish room. And when people got done, empty plates went that way. The kitchen entrance was over here. Anything left on your plate went back to the kitchen. And does that sound familiar, if you've heard of that? And that is how they can only charge you for what you ate. Because they weren't wasting food, it was just going to the next customer. So, yes. So, the missionaries have the best stories. Let me tell you, we have fun stories, okay? And so I always tell people, they're afraid to sit by missionaries. No, we've got great things to tell, okay? And someone this morning, I don't remember who it was, came up and they were like, Betsy, right? And I said, I answer to anything. I have been called everything under the sun. And I don't know if I'd ever said this before at the church, but I even had, in Costa Rica, when I was in language school, I had a little girl calling me Coca-Cola. And I finally said, Gisela, why are you calling me Coca-Cola? Well, here they misunderstood Betsy, and they were calling me Pepsi. And I did not realize they were saying Pepsi. And she said to me, Coke, Pepsi, it's the same thing. And that's why she was calling me Coca-Cola. And I thought, oh my goodness, I've heard Americans say this, but this was like a 7-year-old girl who said, Coke, Pepsi, it's the same thing. So she was calling me Coca-Cola. And when I got to Spain, the Spaniards are very proper and don't want to mispronounce things. So they said, we cannot call you by your name. And I said, why not? Well, they can't say T-S. So they said, we're not going to call you Betsy. They said, how about Bessie? I said, no. And they were like, well, why not? We can say it. And I said, Bessie is a cow. And they said, it's not to us. I said, it doesn't matter. It is to me. I said, Bessie is a common name of a cow. And I was thinking of the Borden cow. And I was like, so they ended up calling me Anna. So, because I was like, sorry. So anything aimed in my direction, I'll answer to, whether I should or not. So what I'm going to talk about this morning, I looked, at the title of what the weekend was, and missionaries talking about reaching the unreached. And I thought we talk so much about reaching the unreached, and missionaries come and we're these weirdo people who show up and we go to weird places, and we tell weird stories or funny things. But then we forget that we're supposed to be reaching the unreached also. And lately, I have just seen opportunities bloom in my neighborhood. I live in Redford. When people ask from outside of, well, even in Michigan, where do you live? I tell them too close to Detroit. I'm a half mile. The northern border of Detroit is 8 Mile, and the western border is Telegraph. I am 12 houses down off of 8 Mile, half mile west of Telegraph. Okay, so, and the obvious reason for living there is it's cheap. Low taxes, cheap house. So that's what I could afford. But it's good. It's where the Lord has me. So as I was thinking about this, I thought, what even led me into missions? I was not going to be a missionary. I was going to be a biologist. And I served as a biologist in preclinical toxicology and pathology with a pharmaceutical company for a couple of years. And the Lord called me out of that. And I look and I think, I am an introvert. I really am. I was super quiet in high school. I was super quiet in my youth group. I was an introvert. What happened? And now I tell people I'm an extroverted introvert. And I had to learn to talk up, and I had to learn to do things. But as I looked at, I think there was a number of things that I wanted to first say that why I think God called me into missions. One, I learned at an early age to be committed to the local church. The local church, going to Sunday school, Bible reading, went to college, got involved in a couple things in college, but after college was involved in small group Bible studies. And I think, first off, it's natural from what we take in that we give out. If we're not taking in, we can't give out. We don't have anything to give out. And I did not grow up in a family that read the Bible at home. We would walk in on Sunday after church. Our Bibles went back on the shelf, and they were on that shelf until we left for Sunday school the next Sunday. That was it. And so it was when I started taking in, I think that is when I started hearing, well, I wasn't even hearing the Lord so much say, go be in missions. It was just, I saw an opportunity, and so I took it. I grew up also in a church where when a missionary visited, it was an event that you did not want to miss. And if you did miss, you kicked yourself for the next month because everybody was still talking about what the missionary said. And so it would be Sunday nights usually is when it would be given to missionaries. And so you did not want to miss a Sunday night meeting with a missionary. And I think the expectation, a sense of expectation in the church and among the individuals in the church, that hearing missionaries was a good thing. They had good things to say. They had fun things to say. And I still think today that missionaries have become oddballs. Now, I will tell you, I've met a lot of oddball missionaries. There are some that are like you're wondering what in the world they're doing there, how they got there, how do we accept these people? After you accept them, you start finding out things that people are really good at hiding in interviews. And there are weirdos. I will give you that. you know? But if there is an expectation among us to our young people starting young, that this is a good thing. If parents would pray for their kids to go. One of our biggest problems when we have young people who want to be missionaries, parents are against them. And especially men, single men. Parents, they don't care if the single girls go. They don't want their single sons to go. Sounds backwards, but they don't want their kids to go. Are we praying to raise up people who will be missionaries? Are we willing that they would go and be in harm's way? Because some are in harm's way, some are not. I grew up in a super poor family. My dad was blind. You know, we were on assistance for a while. I grew up in a black neighborhood. It was normal to me. Black neighborhood in the 60s, okay? I knew who Martin Luther King was because he was in all my neighbors' windows. So they pick his pictures and stuff like that. So that, it doesn't matter so much where we're coming from or where those kids are coming from, but are we building a sense of expectation into them? I started getting involved in outreaches, okay, and tutoring in Philadelphia, and going into homes where the only heat they had was opening the oven door. And that oven door was open and little ones running around. But the heat was coming out of the oven, that's it. And not even very good ovens that like they were gonna blow up. I started working with, the only way I can put it is street kids in Camden, New Jersey. Camden is, I don't know if you've heard about Camden. People call Newark, New Jersey, the armpit of the U.S. I don't know in Michigan you've heard that, but that's our view on the East Coast. Newark is the armpit. Camden is the armpit. Camden is poor. Camden has fallen apart. And these kids had nothing. And we would go over on Saturday morning to this little church. Finally, the pastor retired, and we got kicked out of the church because people in the church didn't like the kids dirtying it. So that was the end of the program with that. And then in Feltonville, and Philadelphia, it's a neighborhood in Philly. Feltonville, I started kind of doing the same thing. And I remember going into kids' homes where the parents were in prison, both parents were in prison, or one was in prison, or the other was, and walking through garbage this high with just a path through it, and it's shoulder height on me all the way through. Or another one who was living with their grandparents, a little boy and two brothers. They were so excited to show me their bedroom. So we go up to their bedroom. Their bedroom is a mattress on the floor. And there are, I still don't get this, empty jelly jars, dirty jelly jars, like on the steps, going upstairs in the house. And what they're so excited about was they had been given a 20-year-old record player, a turntable. And that was their prized possession, these two little boys. And I'm thinking, you don't have sheets on your bed. But this is what they had. So I think it was a natural progression. I didn't mean to get involved in any of these. It just kind of happened. But how did it happen? It happened because of, I just think, being in the Lord's Word. Being in churches where I was being fed, and an expectation that missions or ministry was a good thing. And By the time I turned 14, I started getting asked to help with DVBS. Are we asking kids? Are we bringing them in? Are we training them? Who are you training? We need to be training the younger ones. And it may sound like a little thing, but part of the training can come from having them in the kitchen. It's starting, that's serving. And I tell our new missionaries, I've cleaned a lot of toilets. Okay, and that's not bragging, or that's not saying how awful that is. I just have. I've cleaned a lot of toilets in churches. I've emptied a lot of trash cans. And I think that even that progression, that's a part of serving, including serving reaching neighbors. Because if we're going to do local outreach, it's going to be dirty. It's not clean. It's not standing on a corner with a bullhorn. No bullhorns. Bullhorns they're old. There may be some place that you do, but that's not going to work in your neighborhood, as you know. We have people who come to send and want to be missionaries. They've never done squat. We ask them, okay, what are you involved in? Like, what are you involved in your church? Nothing. Nothing. And I think, how are you going to now go and serve? You don't know what serving is. Serving is, I work on the little kids, and when I am in, right now I'm only doing Sunday school the months I have a fifth Sunday, so this month will be one. I get those kids, and I start telling them, their part in serving is if they see a napkin on the floor, they pick it up. They are serving Jesus by picking up that napkin. Whether it be here or picking up a piece of paper in front of a neighbor's house. That is serving Jesus. And they are a part of the church. And if we start young, we've got to build young that the kids are a part of the church. They're not something that's shuffled off somewhere. And I'm not saying kids shouldn't have the classes. The kids shouldn't be together doing something special. I'm not saying that. But they need to learn that they are a part of every single aspect of the church. And I think we were taught that when we were young, and it's not being taught to most kids anymore. It's all, and I know you've heard this, a lot of entertainment type stuff. And that's okay if they're being taught to serve. They can pick up something just the same as anybody else can. They can stand there next to the person handing out bulletins and help to give out bulletins. Whether it's 5 bulletins and they lose their concentration and they're gone, that's okay. They did 5. They helped with 5. That's all they need. So I'm not expecting the kids to be, serving communion. I'm not saying this. I'm saying let's start with something simple. Because I think that that's how I got started, okay? Outreach to neighbors does not need to be a big deal. Outreach to people around us. And I am amazed lately at things that I find myself doing. I never saw myself as the person reaching the neighbors. I am not okay, Janet McClanahan is probably, as you can probably guess, the type who is sharing the gospel with telephone poles. If you know what I mean, and I mean that in a good way. She can't help herself. It just exudes from her, all right? The majority of us are not that. That is not us, okay? We need to recognize that's not the gift the Lord gave most of us. And by the way, I sat there listening to her last night and I thought, oh my goodness, she could be the twin of Aggie Hake, who was a missionary in Brazil. So I texted my housemate, who is a missionary in Brazil and knows Janet, and I said, do you know who Janet McClanahan is? I said, she is a twin of Aggie. She said they were best friends. And I was like, and I mentioned it to Janet afterwards, and she got teary because Aggie has passed away now, and she started telling me things, trying to learn a language. Anybody trying to learn a language, you put your foot in your mouth a lot. You better know how to laugh at yourself because you're going to say dumb things and a lot of embarrassing things that you never guessed you would have said. Okay, so I just thought I would share with you some basic things that you're going to say, these are normal. Maybe you do and maybe you don't. Maybe you just never thought of it. The reason I am sharing it is because my neighbors are shocked that I have done some of these things as simple can be. In my neighborhood, and I was just sharing at my table, when the housing market fell in 2008, Redford especially crashed. Detroit and Redford crashed. Do you think the other housing prices went? The houses in my neighborhood were suddenly, we paid $127 in 2003, my housemate and I, and the house was worth like $25,000 from 127. The one next was sold for 25. And then we were thrilled when our house value went up to 35,000. Okay? So what happened was a lot of people from Detroit, the way I put it is anybody with wherewithal got out of Detroit. And they started buying these cheap houses. And so our neighborhood changed from a very white neighborhood to a very mixed neighborhood. And it's been interesting, but I grew up in a black neighborhood. We were the only white family. We were the oddballs growing up, so I also think that's why I could go into missions. I was used to not looking like everybody else. So one of the things that I do is as soon as I see, and we have a lot of rental properties, which are starting to be sold off, and now we have owners in them. As soon as I see a truck pull up, U-Haul or something, I go right over and just introduce myself. I've had people shocked. They're like, I've been in this area 8 years and no one has ever introduced themselves. I've never had a neighbor come over and say, hi, I'm Betsy. I live right there. I said, you gotta be kidding. No, no one has ever come over. I'm like, how are we not just saying hello to the neighbor? Now, I have to tell you, people moving out of Detroit do not trust anybody. They don't trust each other. My black neighbors will not talk to my black neighbors. They don't trust them. And then you've got this weirdo white woman who's coming over and saying hello. And I am the one now who is introducing them to each other. As strange as that seems. They have never had anybody say hello. So I go over, I will just go out to Dunkin' Donuts in the middle of their moving, come back, hand them a dozen donuts. I know you're going to get hungry, something for you to grab. I might, once in a while, I've gone to Gordon Food Service, bought a frozen casserole, throw it in the oven. This is cheap because I'm not making anything. I'm just throwing this thing in the oven. And then 2 hours later, show up at their house with it. Something cheap. I'm not putting out a lot of money on it. I don't do that all the time. Sometimes I can't. Sometimes I am too busy. I'm gone. I'm not feeling well. It doesn't happen. But they are dumbfounded that somebody would do this. And I am like, this is so simple. Okay, if I'm sweeping the street, in Philly we call it a gutter. Nobody ever knows what I'm talking about. You know, like where the curb is. We always called it a gutter. And people are like, no, gutters are on houses. Anyway, that gutter, the dirty gutter on the floor, the ground. If I go out and I sweep it, there have been times if I'm up to it, I will sweep somebody else's. They don't have to know who did it. They may not even realize it's done. But I will just go sweep somebody else's gutter, especially if I know that person is struggling. Okay? I've shared cookies, tomatoes from my garden. Last year, my garden was horrible. I had the same 3 tomato plants from the same exact place, from Bourdines. If you know Bourdines, I love Bourdines. Went back, last year, I don't think we got 8 or 9 tomatoes. This year, I've had over 500. I am making tomato sauce. I am giving neighbors tomatoes. I meant to bring some tomatoes for you. Didn't even know if you ate them, but I forgot them. So I still have, I picked like 22 tomatoes at a time. Given tomatoes. There have been times if I buy a little plant, I'll buy another one and just take it to a neighbor. Or just stick it on their porch. If I see a neighbor limping, I will go over and ask how they're doing. What happened? I just noticed that you're moving slow, you're limping. Leftover food from send events. If we have a seminar, we have anything. We had in July a 2-day thing we just called The Gathering. It was 80th anniversary. It was retirees and missionaries, and we had about 300 people show up for it. They had all these leftovers. I was not in charge of running this thing. I tried to stay as far away from running as I could because I had a 3-day program afterwards. And what do they do? Betsy, we have food left over. What do we do with it? I'm like, why are you asking me? I loaded up my car twice, 2 different days with food. I felt like a vendor. I pulled into my driveway partway, opened the trunk, and went and knocked on neighbors' doors and said, I have food. And I said, we had a conference, a seminar. I said, it's left over, it's all good. Some of it's not been touched. Do you want any? And it's probably the 3rd time I've done that. It was gone. It was gone in 5 minutes. And the end of that week, we had another one. I fell really bad. I don't know if any of you know this. I fell and smashed my face really bad. In fact, it was that following day. I am convinced it's because I was so tired. I stepped on a round stone rock, didn't know it, and hit face first, and ended up with a concussion. Ended up not being able to run the program that I was supposed to be running. But my car was still there because I couldn't drive because of my concussion. What do they do at the end of it? Friday, 7 p.m. Somebody's going to drive my car back. They loaded all the food in the car and brought it to me. Betsy will know what to do with it. Once again, I opened my trunk, just had knocked on neighbors' doors, and people took it. So these are all silly, simple things. And what's come of it? I now have neighbors, have neighbors told me that no one has ever greeted them. No one has ever brought food over. And I've got, some of you know, I've got my own health problems. There are times that like I'm flat out. So I'm not doing this constantly, but they start asking about me. Sometimes suspiciously, why are you doing this? As soon as they start asking about me, that gives me the right to ask them about them. If you feel you're being intrusive, the moment somebody says, so what do you do anyway? Okay, you have a right to ask them. So, where are you actually from? Are you from the area? That is my favorite line. Where are you from? Did you grow up here? That's my favorite line when somebody new walks into our church on a Sunday morning. I go over and say, hey, hi, I'm Betsy. Oh, do you live close by? That question opens the door. Believe it or not. It is unintrusive. You're not hitting them over the head with anything. The only thing you're doing is saying, where are you from? Oh, well, my family's been here for X number of years. Or, oh, I'm from Kentucky, and I've only been here 3 weeks. Oh, what brought you here? People start sharing from a simple question, okay? So it's not a big to-do. Just they ask what I do for a living, and I come back and say, I tell them how long I've lived there. They're usually shocked. It's as long as I've ever lived any place. So we moved in, we bought the house in 2003. So this is 22 years. And they can't believe anybody's lived any place 22 years. So that is a big thing, But just simple questions, because they ask me, I can ask them. So I now have neighbors asking me for simple things. It sounds crazy. I have somebody came and asked me, a neighbor across the street, can I help her find her keys? She lost the keys in her house, and she said, I'm panicked. The only thing I can think of is if another pair of eyes looks around the house. We didn't find them, I admit. We did not find them. But she later found them, like 2 weeks later. But just that kind of thing. I now have neighbors who are saying to me, will you pray with me? This is going on. They'll tell me what's going on, and then they'll just say, can you pray? And the first time somebody said, I'm like, did I hear you right? Because people don't want this, usually, Can you pray with me? So now I have people asking me for prayer. This sounds like a silly thing, but I keep the front of our house looking really nice. And I don't have money. I do not make much money, but it's pulling weeds. And you cannot believe how many conversations I get because I'm in front of my house pulling weeds. And people will tell me, oh man, I wish my house looked like this. I have to tell you, sometimes I say, it can. It can. All you have to do is bend over and pull that weed, Oh, I wish you could come to my house and do this. There have been times that I had gone and helped a couple neighbors, and I found they never did anything else. And so I'm kind of wary on doing that. So I also hang out in front of the house when I want to meet somebody. A woman I noticed about 2 months ago started going by about 6 p.m. on her wheelchair. I'm pushing her wheelchair with her little doggy. So I started watching for her. The front of the house, my flower beds are my excuse to be out front. That is totally just my excuse. I go out and I hang out there when I see somebody, if I see them coming in a certain direction, so I can go do it and be there and then get a conversation going. I did meet the woman in the wheelchair. Her name is Tamika, and she lives on the next street over, and she obviously has really serious physical problems, but she still pushes her wheelchair all the way around the block and taking her doggy for a walk. And it is just going out doing something as simple as hanging out front, sweeping, anything I can do to keep an eye out. A guy named Bob. Bob, 22 years, hasn't talked to me until about 4 months ago. Lives catty corner from me. People told me Bob was the nicest guy in the neighborhood. I tried to talk to him when we first came in. Bob would not talk to me. Taken 22 years, Bob now talks. Bob now comes over and will accept things from me. These are little things. So when I say reaching the unreached, I'm reaching our neighbors. I am not talking about fancy programs. There are fancy programs. I'm not saying that. You can do those kind of things. But I just want to, one of the things I wanted to do today was encourage you to think of any way to start a conversation with people. They're not expecting it today. They don't expect it. No one talks to anybody. They don't talk beyond, hi. If they do that, I can't even get my neighbors to do that. They're now doing it, okay? I am now seeing this one and saying, hey, you know, have you seen this one? Have you seen that one? Some of them are in trouble with the police. I came home one day, and this was maybe 6 months ago. I came home from shopping, and I pull in the driveway, and we're the only people on the street that use our garage. I don't get it, but everybody else has full of junk. And then they wonder why their catalytic converters are cut off. And, you know, I just go right into the garage. So I went into the garage, I come in the house, back of the house for groceries, and my housemate Sue says, what are the police doing out front? So what police? She said, they're all over the front lawn. And this is a small house, it's Redford. I said, there are no cops out there. She said, look out the window. There were 5 police cars. They had followed me down the street, and I hadn't even seen them. They were all coming behind me. And they wanted the kid next door, who was the sweetest kid. But his father is a thug, a known thug in Detroit, runs a chop shop. Everybody's afraid of his father because he'll kill you as fast as flat in your face. Mother's a drug addict. Grandfather is on the front porch, just smashed, laying on the front porch. I would see him passed out on the front porch. The kids were lost. And that's one of the biggest things we've done is befriend children of the neighbors. We have a rule that we set when we first moved in. No children in our house without their parents. No children can come in through our doors unless we're not having accusations against us, and we don't want something to go missing and we wonder if the kid took it. So that was our first rule. But we have a front porch, and we have a backyard, and we can talk to the kids. And so Marquise was in trouble. And so I went out to the cops and just said, you're on my grass. I know you're going to the house next door. They were banging on the door. And I said, can I ask why you're here? And they said, no. And another one, they came up and he said, yeah. He said, do you know whose car this is? And I said, well, it looks like Marquise's car, but they moved out 3 weeks ago. And they're like, no, we think he's here. And they said, but nobody's coming out. So they're out there for a while. I go back out to the cops after a while, and they said, has he ever threatened you? I said, no, I get hugs. And they looked at me. I said, I'm not kidding. I said, he calls me Miss Betsy. And I said, I get hugs from him. And the cops thought that was like, we can't be talking about the same person. So eventually they leave because they didn't find him. He wasn't there. I'm in my bedroom, and I hear Marquise's voice. I look out the window, and they're in the backyard, him and his girlfriend. And I went out, and I said, Marquise. He's like, oh, hi, Miss Betsy. And I'm like, there were 5 police cars here for you. And he's like, yeah, I know. And I said, what did you do? And he said, I have a warrant out for my arrest. And this kid is 18. And he said, I didn't know what to do. I panicked, so I fled. And he said, I didn't know where to go, so I came back here. They don't live there. The house was empty. He had no place to go, so he ran back. And I said, well, they were pounding on the door. He said, yeah, we hopped the fence and went to McDonald's. There's McDonald's a block away. They were sitting in McDonald's while there's 5 police cars in front of the house. I thought they should have just tried McDonald's. So he's like, look what we got. He's talking to me like he's a 6-year-old. He's 18. He doesn't have any influence in his life. And I told him what the police said, and I said, they asked me if you ever threatened me, and I said, no, I get hugs from you. He said, oh, Miss Betsy, I would give you a hug right now, and if I could. There was a 6-foot fence between us. I was like trying to see over the fence like this with my nose. And, but all just because of trying to reach out to these people. So basically, I just have basic conversations, and this is nothing fancy this morning, and this is no high-tech anything. I just wanted to encourage us as individuals, to reach out to the ones around us, to say hello, to go when you see a moving truck come up, just go say hi, introduce yourself. Nothing fancy. Somebody walks in the door of the church, hi, I'm Betsy. Do you live close by? And if they say, I live across the street, great. Oh, I'm so glad we're here for you. And if they say, I drove in from Lansing, then you say, oh, what brought you here? That's all it takes. And Marquise and the next door, the police could not believe that all Marquise hugs me. And here they are, 5 police officers from 2 towns after him, chasing him down the road. So, like I said, nothing fancy. Missionary work is not, it's not the fancy stuff. People want to hear, missionaries have the feeling that you want to hear all of these fantastic salvation stories. And I know you do, because you're supporting missionaries. But, and you want to see people come to the Lord. But the real life is slogging it out. And slogging it out for a missionary is the same as slogging it out for you. Only they have gone and learned a new language, a new culture, in a new place. And it may be a little harder on them because people are looking at them, and I'm telling you, you're a weirdo overseas. You know, you're just always a weirdo. It's just the way it is. You're never going to fit in, no matter how much you try. They may want you to be, and they may love you to death. You still look American, regardless. You will always be American. You will always look American. That's part of the missionary life. We live in a fishbowl, right? Total fishbowl. Anything with being a missionary. And that is exhausting. It's exhausting to be in the fishbowl all the time. My neighbors knew how much trash I threw out. They knew what was in my trash. I don't know how they knew it, but somehow they knew about my trash. They knew everything. They know what you eat. They know what goes in and out of your apartment. It doesn't matter. They know. Even though there's nobody there and there's no cameras, they still know what is coming in and out of your place, okay? So anyway, thank you for listening to me. I just hope it's an encouragement this morning as you think about how do you reach somebody, whether it's a package of cookies when they're moving in or sweeping somebody's gutter. And there are so many times when people say to me, I wish my place looked like yours. And I've said to them, it can. And I tell them, and I think so many times, these are always younger people, and I think, if you only knew how much I hurt, if you only knew how hard this was to do. But this is just the way it is, you know? You do what you can. And some days I can't do it, and so I don't do it. And sometimes I go a couple months and I am physically not able to do it, but then I can. And the reward is my neighbors coming and saying, can you pray with me? I need prayer. So thank you for listening to me. I hope that wasn't too boring, too plain. And like I said, sit with a missionary. We can tell you some great stories. And I can tell you some great gory stories from my time working for Wyeth. If you ever want to hear gory stories, I got those too. So thanks again.